Good morning. Welcome to this rather small, intimate gathering here in this room. And well done for staying till the end of the conference, especially after all the fun yesterday evening. So this is a panel discussion, basically a Q&A type panel. There are microphones in the aisles, so we'd like you to use those rather than kind of just shouting out. And should we do some introductions? Start the...
Who, me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Alistair Pugin, Office Service MVP from South Africa. Yeah.
I'm Laura Rogers. I'm a SharePoint MVP. I live in Birmingham, Alabama. I work at IW Mentor.
Hi, good morning. Michelle Caldwell. I'm an Office Servers and Services MVP and a Regional Director, and I work at Avanade out of Seattle.
Hi, I'm Antonio Mayo. I'm an Office Server and Services MVP from Ottawa, Canada. And I work for Protiviti, which is part of Robert Half.
Morning all, I'm Victor Wilén from Sweden. I'm working for Avanade, SharePoint MVP, but also SharePoint Certified Master and Certified Architect in SharePoint.
Hello, I'm Spence Harbour. I'm based in Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland. And SharePoint Server and Identity Server MVP. So if somebody wants to kick it off, feel free. We do sort of have some themes that we kind of pre-canned, but this really is your opportunity to ask us anything, and it's deliberately, we deliberately have no Microsoft people on the stage, okay? So you can ask whatever you like.
Except what's coming in the product.
Except what's coming next, yeah. Except for, you can ask whatever you like. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll get the answer you want, right?
So go ahead.
And go.
Hi, my name is Mateusz, and I was wondering, you certainly made sharing quite easier, and you encourage users to share the documents. Sorry about my voice. And I was wondering, what would be your recommendation for the customers who like large lists and libraries, and they also like sharing documents, and they can easily hit the limit of, or the recommendation of 5,000 unique permissions per list or library?
Recommendations is, first of all, there is a limit, yes, and based on SQL limits and stuff like that. But in the cloud now, they are redoing that quite much using AI and those machine learning and those intelligent indexes. So going forward, you hopefully shouldn't hit those limits in at least SharePoint Online. In SharePoint On-Prem, I don't have the answer on what they're doing there.
I mean, absolutely, as Victor says, the SharePoint Online, or any cloud service in this sphere, effectively these problems over time will cease to exist, and some of that knowledge will eventually come into the on-premises product, but we'll never be able to do some of the scenarios that they'll leverage in the cloud because it's just unfeasible, to do it on-premises. Even if it was commercially sensible for them to do it, it wouldn't be cost-effective for the customer on-prem. So there will always be some kind of limit in an classic on-prem deployment, again, because of the inherent SQL limitations there that we can't have elasticity in that respect on premises. In terms of what to do about that, well, it's like any sharing solution is, you're getting a whole bunch of business benefit from the capability, but there's always going to be an associated sort of compromise, or the other end of it is all around user education and basically finding better ways to organize that information. And that's a tough ask, and we've everybody in the SharePoint world's been saying that since the day one of SharePoint, right? And it's not an easy thing to achieve because it's going to be different for all the every different customer. But really, that is the right way to approach it.
All right, thank you.
Maybe I'll just add one thing. I'm not sure if your question was related to SharePoint Server on-premise or SharePoint Online. Both? Yeah. Okay. So I do think we saw some great things earlier this week around predictive indexing with SharePoint Online, where now you can still have, as you can today, very large lists and libraries. And you get some automatic indexes that get created. That's already happening. And the predictive indexing allows you to page through that just as a user scrolls down. So as these gentlemen have said, I think that problem is starting to go away, or at least we're getting some better capabilities around just being able to still scroll through our content, even in large lists.
I was wondering if you have, for any clients, helped them understand what the roles and responsibilities, how they'll shift for SharePoint admin as they move from on-prem to SharePoint Online, and if it equates to about the same amount of work and same people, different skill sets, things of that nature. And I've been asking around the conference. I do know that there was one person in the SharePoint team that said she was a writer for the SharePoint team, and she said she's going to start writing something about that. But I've been asking around, haven't seen anything yet. And part of that is to understand a chargeback model, a potential chargeback model, and how that's going to work.
Yeah, certainly the classic SharePoint administrator or infrastructure specialist, the role does change. Even just if you stick with on-premises, the on-premises converged code base basically defines that their role is shifting dramatically in terms of the core technologies that they need to be aware of and skilled up in. That changes considerably. So there's a training investment, but also the types of discussions are hopefully less technical and more focused on solving business problems. So that's the biggest change that the cloud in general, but specifically Office 365 drives to all of us in this space is we need to be spending less time on building complex configurations and deployments and understanding that the focus should be on the business productivity elements of it, and the fact that that is going to be a constant moving target. So staying up to date is a critical piece of that, just in terms of the sheer amount of stuff that is happening, is a big shift.
Yeah, and I would just add to what Spence is saying. I think the mind shift is even broader across the IT org, right? Had a lot of meetings this week about how infrastructure's owned the service for a long time. It was a server-based service, and now we're moving to more of the SaaS-based service. So who owns the service shifts in a lot of IT orgs from the traditional infrastructure ownership to maybe a platform or offering ownership. At Avanade, our group has changed a lot. We've been on a cloud journey for a couple of years, and the way I've seen that team shift is from managing the servers to helping everyone else understand how to kind of look forward and know what comes down in the evergreen environment, educating the rest of IT and the platform ownership or the service ownership about kind of perspective on how to use what or what to use when or use for purpose, because you guys as admins see a lot of what's coming, right? And then helping the business empower them to all the kind of great things that you guys heard about this week and ongoing. So I think the role shifts in IT completely in a lot of orgs, even from an ownership perspective. But there's a lot of value that infrastructure admins can bring, because you guys are seeing the tenant. You can see a lot of the telemetry and things like that. So I think the role becomes more about value than in the past about running servers and keeping things up. And so I think it's more interesting, honestly, for many of you that have been doing that work for so many years. Now you actually get to kind of expand those roles and learn new skills and have a different voice at the table, if you will.
For a long time, IT has sort of struggled to actually really provide proper value to the business. With this changing cadence, we actually have an opportunity to help the business hit refresh based on our experiences of having to do so. So there can be that side of it as well.
Think about all the people that are coming to SharePoint brand new, SharePoint Online in droves, and this is all brand new to them. So Microsoft's got this balance of making it all make sense to the people that have historically been admins and the people that are coming here brand new. So the admin center has been kind of disjointed and confusing. So they're working really hard to kind of put that all together, make it make sense, and even put some wizards in there for admins to be able to do things like employee offboarding. Where all do you need to delete the employee, and again, make it easy for people that are new to SharePoint, and then also make it make sense to the old school admins.
Yeah, and I think you're probably going to say something about the role coming with GDPR and how important.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. So we actually, you brought up a great question. We get this question a lot, and sometimes it's expressed as a concern, right? You have IT admins that are worried about Okay, I see my company moving all our workloads to Office 365, to Azure. You know, I as an IT admin, my role for years has been managing server farms, standing up servers, applying updates, applying patches. How does my role fit into that, right? Am I going to be out of a job? We sometimes get that question. And I think it's important for those people to understand that their role very much needs to shift from one of managing servers to one that manages services, right? One that works with the business to determine, okay, what new services do you need to be more productive and to actually work with the business to roll those out in a well-planned, well-governed, well-defined way. And they also need to be prepared for, you know, their department to no longer perhaps be a cost center, but more be a center that enables the business. They need to look at it that way. So the role, I think, if you embrace that shift, you embrace moving to the cloud, the IT admin's role becomes more strategic. And I think it's an opportunity for them to become even more critical to the business than they are today. Because honestly, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, if your job is applying patches and updates to servers, there's a million people out there that can do that, right? But as an IT admin, if you understand the business, if you can work and communicate with the business and make them more productive, I think your role becomes even more critical to them.
Have you seen any of that quantified in any blog post or documented as far as how things shift and the skill sets, things of that nature?
There are quite some good resources, but most of them, unfortunately, are kind of private at present. You know, this sort of thing that companies have done or groups have done, especially consulting businesses. But yeah, as things move forward, you expect to see more and more of that content, and actually, we can take that as a direct task away and try and perhaps get some stuff out there based on our experiences and the wider, community as well. That's the other thing that's important, right? That we're all from different places, we've all got different regulations and little things like that that have big influence. And so it's a very broad and interesting area, right? It's actually a good thing for all of us, despite the perhaps initial apprehension, because we're actually making ourselves more valuable and we're getting the chance to do new things instead of the same old things, which can be very attractive.
And one more thing on that I forgot to mention, with GDPR, right, the General Data Protection Regulation from the EU becoming more important to everyone, I think that's a real opportunity for those IT admins to jump in and help the organization figure out how are we going to comply with all of these new regulations.
Cool.
Great.
Some questions over here.
Right. So with all of the site collections going to kind of a flat earth model and with the hub coming and things like that, I'm curious what some of your thoughts are on kind of what the role of subsites are, where they'll make sense and where they're just right out.
You need to remove them.
You want to start?
I think that's the first thing. Subsites, Microsoft, I don't know if I can say this in the room, subsites have always been an abomination. Okay. Always has a site within a site within a site. Let's call it a subsite. The idea really is to move it more to a flat-based structure. Look at your company organogram, your hierarchy. It's never done there. Everyone operates here. Move that more into the way you manage information more effectively. Because the recursive stuff never ever worked. And we're glad that Microsoft's gone and said, well, move it higher up. Get it up there so that you can actually manage your content better. With the advent of Teams, we're seeing more chat-based information management and content services come through than the traditional enterprise content management, which we've all been dog-fooding for the last 20 years. So yes, get your data up higher. Make sure that you are no longer segmenting content because you've got great search now. And with the whole hub sites pulling information up, you've got a better way to visually represent your data across your organization. So the need for subsites are no longer there.
Yeah, and with the advent of what they're doing in Azure with cognitive services, you start plugging in some more intelligence into those experiences, being able to personalize it because it's more flat. It's easier to actually contextualize the experience and the content for the users to consume. I think that's really kind of what Microsoft's moving towards, so that's easier, because that's always been really hard to do with all the subsite structure, because it's all very disorganized. So making that personalized experience used to take a lot of code and a lot of effort. It was really kind of ridiculous to try to create, where now it's becoming more agile and flexible, so we can do better, right, with serving knowledge up and making it easy to find and use.
The main reason a lot of people did subsites in the past was just for the navigation, because of the inherent navigation, but we don't really have to worry about that anymore, so you don't have to do that.
That
Yeah.
old file share mindset.
Yeah,
Right.
folder within a folder within a folder with a date.
Yeah, and that is also, aside from being a complete nightmare to work with from an end user perspective, can be a significant, information disclosure risk, right? So a flatter structure is far easier to manage from a security and compliance perspective.
So in summary, subsites are dead.
Yeah.
I'll perhaps disagree a little bit with my co-panelist up
Excellent,
here.
that's what we need, some debate.
So an example, about a month ago, I wrote a PowerShell script that created 548 subsites for a particular client.
Yeah.
For a very specific purpose. We looked at all the other options available, and in this particular case, it was the only way to implement what they wanted. And this was very much permission related. So it's a very controlled environment, and in this case, subsites for us was the best option. I do think hub sites provides a great alternative to that. So I think it's still, I think it's very promising, hub sites. I think it still remains to be seen once we start playing with it, just how much is it going to enable us to get rid of subsites. So I don't disagree with the sentiment,
Yeah.
but I think today there are still circumstances where that's worthwhile.
Yeah.
You? Yeah.
Oh, hi. With regards to social collaboration, can you talk about the similarities and differences between Teams and Yammer? And if you had to choose one, which one would you choose?
Did you
Shall
see
we
the
take a
circles?
I think Microsoft did a really good, for the first time actually, a really good vision on how that works. When they had a slide that said inside scope and outside scope, I think it was.
Yeah, inner
where
loop,
teams
outer loop,
are
yeah.
focused on more the inside, where you know the people you're talking to and you have a direct conversation. Whereas Yammer or the outside scope, you don't really know who's the target. You know probably the target audience, but not the individuals in that. So I think it was in the first SharePoint keynote they had, day 2. I think that slide, and I think that was the best one Microsoft produced in that area so far.
Yeah, I think it's important to not think of it as an or story, but
No.
as an and story for communication. And if you're talking to people in the business that own those capabilities, right, corp communications and HR, they very much want a way to communicate very broadly to the organization, where that's something that Teams really isn't built for purpose for, but also still being able to do targeted communications within set groups of people, which Teams is great for. So I think you get a lot of goodness for social communication in the platform, and it's about using it for the right things. I think I wouldn't choose one, I would say both.
Yeah, it will always be an overlap, but that's user preferences as well.
But
Yeah,
I think it's becoming, more clear, though. The
Yeah.
overlap is that it's social collaboration, but it's not, the purpose of each is quite different, because when Yammer first got acquired, it was like, you can use it for all these different things, right? And you can do these private groups and public groups, and I used to give sessions on the use cases for this. So, but that's, they've decided to go a different route with that for the set group communication. And I think it's really good, because I think the Teams experience has a lot of potential for that.
Yeah, and it's an inherent nature of social collaboration tools is that we don't know how they're going to best be used until they're used by a lot of people, right? So there's always going to be many tools. There's always going to be some overlap. The use cases are going to change over time. If we think to back, even just something like Twitter, when it started compared to how we use it today, they're two very different things, right? And so that will be the continued cadence with these kind of tools for many years.
Thank you.
It's down here.
Okay.
That guy.
He's been standing there for a while.
Yeah.
Can I go?
Yeah.
Okay. My question is, what are your thoughts on this new personalized search experience? Like when you're on the SharePoint home and you do a search, it's very different, both in the look and feel and experience compared to the Enterprise Search Center. For example, it's now all powered by the graph, according to my understanding, and there's no way to customize the new experience. There's no search refiners. So what would be your recommendations on when to introduce that new personalized experience to your end users, and how to make it not too unfamiliar to them when they're coming from the old experience of the Enterprise Search Center?
I'm I'll start.
Great question.
It's a great question. So my perspective on this, one, start with a pilot to educate and get an understanding of how it's going to be perceived in your org. Pick a pilot group and kind of let them see it. Also remember that for those that don't like the experience, there's still a way to, there's a link at the bottom where you can go to like the classic view of search. So if you have users, educating those users that might not be comfortable with the new search experience, that they still can operate and search the way they like. My experience has been in most orgs who haven't turned this on, don't have this implemented and haven't gone to the cloud, they really love the experience. I have very few people that have where you show it to them and have you seen the new search, and they see it and they go, wow, that's really helpful because I don't have to go hunting and packing around. It actually does a pretty good job of serving up what I expect to see in most cases, and then the ability that I can hover over somebody and then get the content in a panel that shows me kind of what they've been working on. All of that's really great. I think it's about setting expectations, rolling it out with a pilot, understanding how it's going to be perceived, and then communicating as you go, as you take it along, right, in the org, so that you can get people on board. I think if you just flip it on and hope for the best, it's probably not going to be the best outcome.
I have to disagree a bit there. As many of my clients will not like this new experience because if they're considering SharePoint Online as an intranet, for instance, since we can't customize anything of that, HR will not pay for that intranet, communications will not pay for that intranet, you building on top of that. So, but the good thing is that it's built on the Microsoft Graph. So hopefully we can get that data and create a similar experience in an intranet page where we can get all the other stuff in as well. So for some organizations this might be perfect, but for some, I know I had a meeting with a client this morning and they asked me exactly this question, what we're going to do now.
Yeah.
And they will not fly with them, but it's up to you.
Yeah, I think it's, if we're talking intranets, then I agree completely. We're just talking the search experience on the SharePoint homepage, and you're not using that for your intranet homepage. That's different, right? I use the SharePoint homepage search very differently than I use our homepage, our intranet homepage at Avanade, and differently than I use Graph and Delve. So there's lots of search findability experiences in the platform. So yeah, it's not an easy thing to solve for, but there's more than one way to find content. I don't know I'm not sure if your question was for intranet search or for just the SharePoint.
Well, yeah, for intranet search, because like say you're in your OWA Outlook, right? And then you click on the SharePoint tile and you see a search box. Most end users would assume, oh, I'm now going to search SharePoint, my intranet,
It's not optimal experience. It's Microsoft trying to build an experience that fits everyone here. But yeah, it will be different for each and every company. Perhaps for small, medium businesses, this is a perfect solution.
Yeah.
You don't have to do any investment at all. But for a large enterprise, you might need to do customizations. Specifically, if you're doing enterprise search, you need to do certain different verticals, working with metadata and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and there is a lot of people in the ecosystem too that you can partner with.
Absolutely.
To kind of bolt on that connected intranet experience on top of that search to make it feel more, traditional or comfortable for end users.
Thank you.
Okay. Now it must be over here.
Hi, thanks panel. So I work in a hospital, so we have very strict security needs, and so far we haven't completed our Office 365 migration to SharePoint Online yet, and we don't have any mobile capabilities. So we're about to engage on a one-year project with a partner to do that. So do you guys, have any sort of advice or, tips or things that are pitfalls that maybe I could avoid? Because I think the experience looks a lot easier, especially from like a communication news perspective, even on the mobile phones. But, I work with people like, doctors who may have technology savvy, but they don't want to take the time to do stuff. So do you think it's going to be easy and intuitive, or will there be a lot of learning, like end user learning and training?
I think it's easier and more intuitive for people that are completely new to SharePoint Online, but for people going from on-premises, it is a little awkward and confusing for them more than it is for new people. Like I used to create a SharePoint announcement, and now it's really be done better as a news page, and so things like that they might have to do differently. But just in general, just sitting down and looking at SharePoint for the first time, like my mom, trying to use a document library, they've really simplified a lot of that.
Yeah. Do you know what you want to use it for?
So we're trying to do a whole employee engagement like sort of app. Like we want to bring in chatbots and eventually bring in things like their Epic line of business applications so that our intranet is the one-stop shop and then it sends them to anything that they need to do.
Have you started measuring literacy skills in the organization so that you actually know where you are, sort of a state of literacy? A lot of times we don't do that and we introduce technology and you got half of the company going great and the other half going, I don't understand it. So measure up front before you start embarking on any deployment of this sort. And I mean, yes, Office 365 or 365, because I'm in the US, is easier to adopt than the old stuff that we used to. But understand your audience, understand persona management, so that you know that you've got a literacy level of someone working in the basement at 100 if you had to market, and an executive at 200, and you need to fill that gap. So governance change, training plans, transition management, understand how that gets applied so that you can actually ramp them up before you flip the switch and go, ta-da, look what we have.
Would they do surveys for things like that?
So there's a couple of ways of measuring it. There are statistics out there that you can actually follow. There's an entire process. I forget the name. Tracy's actually, that's what she does. There is, I don't think she's in the room. One of our fellow MVPs actually does this in real time. So there's a huge scoring mechanism. Seidlitz van Buren used to do the ECM maturity assessment as well, so that you understand your users. And I think the point really is to understand your users, understand where they are. Not only do you know what an intranet is, but can you actually work with Word and Excel and all of those things. So we never delve down to that level. So understand your audience before you go rolling out, and then you can sculpt your training and your communication plan as you go along with the different personalities that you have in your organization.
Yeah, and I would just add what Alistair's saying. Observation, there's no replacement for observation in the field. Builds empathy for what you're building. And then just when you are doing the observation, you can start to understand how they work together. Yeah. So how do they collaborate? And is the thing I'm building going to enable that better? Or is it going to be completely opposite? And how ready are they for change? Because those are things that are also going to really impact how well it's perceived or how hard it's going to be to get them on board. So observation is one of the cheapest things you can do to go kind of start understanding the people you're trying to go help.
Yeah, the other classic kind of user adoption techniques should all be considered as well. Don't overlook the kind of local evangelist who's not an IT person, a regular person within the organization to help drive that community approach to it. And you mentioned you're working with a partner. They will almost certainly have have been through that process many times, and so they can help with supporting that as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I learned a lot in that one.
Hello. So next year I plan on championing the push of Office 365 groups with SharePoint Online, OneDrive, Teams, etc. One of my concerns was I'm E3, so I only have 5 terabytes of storage, I believe, right off the bat. Should I be preemptively purchasing more storage with the launch of groups? Like, have you guys seen companies in which you kind of give them groups and all of a sudden you're using up all the storage? Like, do groups actually grow that rapidly, I guess? I don't know.
Yeah, I certainly, from my perspective, I haven't seen anything sort of evidence that means there's a huge jump up in storage from it at all, really. I mean, it's encouraging adoption, but that's a good thing. I wouldn't feel the need to take any kind of preemptive investment there, just off the back of groups, certainly.
Okay. Agree, and also use all the different reports you have and measure that so you can see when you're closing in on reaching your quota, so to say.
Yeah, I mean, I was only concerned because I worked with just like one team, which is the broadcast and esports teams, and immediately they already utilized 2 to 3 terabytes worth of storage. And so, with launching it to other teams, like, should I go ahead and preemptively just buy 100 terabytes, to expand my SharePoint Online storage? But
it's not like in the old days where you'd actually physically go buy a disk, stick it into your RAID array, and then wait 3 days for this thing to do the parity across everything. Literally, I want more storage, it's provisioned immediately. So measure what you're going to do, and then do some trend mapping over the next 3-4 months. speak to the departments, ask them what sort of content. There's actually a calculation somewhere on TechNet that will tell you, will work out if it's document storage, what sort of storage you're going to actually require, size of average documents with versioning and all of those things. And it's an actual formula that you can use to calculate and times that by 12.
Okay.
I'll give you an idea, yeah.
If you can figure out where all the files are right now that are going to move to the cloud, yes,
Yeah.
that would be very helpful.
Yeah, an analysis of that up front is really important to understand if you need to move everything or if not everything necessarily needs to move.
I guess it just feels like it's a different dynamic because as these people try to generate groups to like do projects, right, these new files, they're not historically held in SharePoint today, right? So we've been kind of pushing for all of like Confluence and things like that, but I'm trying to treat SharePoint Online more of a focused, you know, like this is a project, you create a group, and then your team will obviously populate, you know, files or whatever into it.
Yeah.
So.
And also plan with the new expiration policies. Plan that up front so you have that in place.
Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you.
First, I would like to thank you for your time to share your knowledge and experience with us. I have a quick question, which is if I have team site template and I have a lot of navigations, links on it, and I decided to create communication site template, so do I need to move that links in team site to communication manually, or there is link sync between them?
There's no button that goes ta-da, no.
That's correct.
Yeah, there is no button that's going to move your structured or managed navigation from a team site to a communication site. No.
That means it needs to be recreated manually.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be the cleanest way to do it.
Yeah. I don't know if there are any migration tools. I haven't seen any migration tools that will go from a team site to a communication site. No.
But I would check if you've got a migration partner, like an ISV, check with them on their roadmap. Maybe they're working on it. I actually didn't get a chance to stop by any of their booths this week to ask that question.
Yeah.
But the cleanest way, like Laura said, is probably just to do it yourself.
Yeah, and he's just talking about a template. So, yeah, it's because with it, you know, if you're recreating sort of this concept that you had on the other site and you're doing it in a communication site, some things you might be doing differently with all the new modern lists and pages and things like that than you would have had in your template previously. So it's a good time to sit down and rethink things about
like,
that site.
When you have like a lot of links, that mean it's going to take a lot of time to recreate it.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you to a great group of panelists. We appreciate it as well. Just wanted to run past you. Work for an organization. I'm in infrastructure, as also cloud architecture and tenant administration. I sit with my risk folks a lot, and they want to hang their hat on CASB, or Cloud Access Security Broker, and working with that to try to prevent DLP and a bunch of other things. And I've evaluated a couple of these companies, and I cringe a little bit as them being the middleman. What are your experiences with anyone using CASB, and do you think that's diminishing with the Security and Compliance Center and the tools that Microsoft is offering? My view is it's almost like that they're maturing, and these tools are becoming less valuable, or more in the way of functionality.
Yeah, I mean, the fundamental truth here is that the complexity is the enemy of security. So the more and more subsystems that are in place, whilst they address legitimate concerns, more often than not don't actually provide tangible security benefit. And also, as you know, the legacy approach to any type of information security, whether it be perimeter networks, edge devices, data protection elements, those kind of things, simply are never going to be able to keep up with the pace and cadence of the change in the services they're designed to protect. The reason they worked so well in the past is that they knew that these products are going to have a 3-year cycle. They can invest the time and effort necessary to make sure that they work well together. So, from a more kind of abstract perspective, yes, the need for these things is declining, but there's also obviously some of it still remains. And the advice I would always give is keep it as simple as possible, because that will inevitably provide a more secure deployment across the board, whether it's information rights or whether it's virus protection. It doesn't matter what the sector is. And that also allows you to be much more flexible as the changes to the service you're protecting continue to, be in a position to be able to address new threats. Because that's the one thing the kind of the legacy model, if you like, doesn't provide. It's protecting against one segment of risk, and it does that, and that's all it does, and there's no opportunity for it to follow along the trends with the improvements to the service. So reducing the number of components, the number of vendors, the number of solutions on top will give you a more secure solution. And of course, it's a key investment area for Office 365 and the Azure space in general to continue to provide more fit-for-purpose solutions in this space. So
Thank you. It gives me a good gut check, and I've asked them if there's a kill switch because I'm worried that they might not keep up. So most of them have kill switches, so you're able to accommodate it.
I mean, you think about how many people still deploy a traditional, free tier network topology, right? I mean, it's that, there's still quite a lot, right? It should have died a long time ago and it's still out there, of course, but that isn't doing anybody any favors. It's keeping a lot of firewall to support people in a job, right? But that's basically all it's doing. And so, being agile basically is better.
Thank you.
I would just add, I completely agree. I think it is worth looking at the integrated tools that come with Office 365 first. I'll take one example, the DLP tools. Right. I've worked with many of these tools and I've stood up a number of DLPs. And when you have an external DLP trying to work with something like Office 365 or SharePoint, no offense to the DLP vendors, but they're often slow, they're clunky, there's issues. There's a lot of benefit to be gained by these tools simply being integrated right into the platform and working well together, right? You've got many of the tools taking signals from the Microsoft Intelligent Security Graph. You've got many of the tools providing analytics across the different tools. So there's a lot to be gained from that. And as Spencer said, the cadence that Microsoft has with bringing out new security components, new security tools, advancing them has been, in my opinion, incredible. I work with these tools a lot, and it's hard for me to keep up. So that and the transparency they have around what the tools do, often what the tools don't yet do, I think is also a big benefit.
Excellent. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I want to start by just, showing my appreciation to all of you for all the work you do for a community. And I don't know if I can speak for other people, but as an IT pro, you've saved my butt lots of times. So thanks very much. My question is, there was a mention about Teams before. And when I first started working with Teams, I said, oh, look, there's a SharePoint site. But I noticed there's some differences. And I don't know if it kind of concerns you all, but I'm thinking about the arc of adoption and what we've looked at SharePoint as classically and how Teams and SharePoint are going to interact and what kind of guidance. I mean, aside from the obvious, try to separate when you can and look at your focus first. Obviously, people over time are going to say, well, we want to push this because it looks easy. And there's all this SharePoint stuff we're going to want to do later. What do you think are the risks or do you all have concerns about that divide, so to speak, between Teams SharePoint and just native SharePoint?
I'll kick it off. Concerns. So I think what Laura mentioned earlier is right on point for a lot of this stuff. If you have history with the platform as an on-premise product or even as an earlier cloud product for SharePoint before these other capabilities came on board, I have a certain level of expectation when I go into Teams and you tell me that it's plumbed up on the library with SharePoint, and then I go to co-author, and it's a massive disaster.
Right.
Co-authoring has been a pain of mine with Teams for a while, and the product team knows that. I've complained since day one that co-authoring has to come up to par with what I experience on a team site.
Right.
But if you don't have any of that baggage, if you will, or history, then, and you're new to all of this, Teams feels really simple, and I have lots of salespeople that love it, that weren't heavy SharePoint users, and they find it really simple to use, and the mobile experience is great, and they can add channels and customize a whole bunch of things without being a developer. So I think that's empowering and promising. And they've now this week, they're working on the whole chat disparity with Skype and Teams chat. I miss all kinds of chats all the time because half my company wants to chat in Teams, and our culture historically has been all chats in Skype. So I live in Skype all day, and then I look at the end of the day and I've missed like 3 Teams chats that someone was trying to like reach me because they want to work in Teams, because Victor loves to work exclusively in Teams, although he and I work on different parts of the world. But so some of that to me is a little clunky, but I don't want to say, hey, Microsoft, slow down your innovation, because I think we've been there, done that, and that also
I didn't
wasn't-
mention also that we're going to be hybrid for a bunch of years too. So I think that right there, that throws a lot into the pot, because there's previous expectations, but there's, cool stuff that people are being sold on, so to speak. So
Yeah.
that it's going to crash. I'm
And
just concerned about that.
Fit for purpose, right? Be really clear and helping people understand. I don't even love the what to use when. I think it's how to use what for what purpose is more helpful for people, because they can on-ramp lots of different ways to get things done in Office 365. And the only other caution about hybrid, you said for a long time, or maybe it'll persistently for a long time for business reasons. There's lots of clients like that are never going to be not hybrid. They're always going to be hybrid. Is when it's time to upgrade the on-prem side of that platform, that experience, plan well, because it's not documented well right now. I know we gave some feedback to the product team about that a couple months back. Because that's going to come. Lots of people have been hybrid for a long time. They're going to want to upgrade the back end of that so they can get to some of the cool stuff we're putting in the on-premise product. But there's got to be some guidance on that. So reach out to the MVP community when you get there, but also also keep that in the back of your head, right? And be thinking about it. At some point, you're going to have to upgrade that back into the infrastructure, and you're going to have to plan for that as well. So.
Yeah, hybrid's not a journey; it's an end state. So be careful with. No, it is. I mean, everyone says, we're going to move 3 years, and then 10 years later, you still stuff on premise. So.
Yeah, because you're going to the depths of the business, right? Because you're talking about, oh, you really want that? And you've got this political power to say no and things like that. So.
One person in the organization uses it once a month. Yeah, it's still on premise, yeah.
Of the sort of 3 main things I see people doing with SharePoint, custom business solutions, having their own site, and the formal publishing process and formal documents like policy and things like that, and formal intranets. And then, but the third one I see is the just ad hoc collaboration, and people have always been doing that. So I think teams are going to fall more under the ad hoc collaboration, just quickly, get together and talk about a file, or have a meeting. And you just, every time you create a channel, it's creating a folder in a library, but that still kind of is a folder technically is a way of having metadata, because search recognizes the name of that folder, and it does give it sort of a category in SharePoint. So it's not too bad, but that is more of just the informal thing. And users have always been doing that kind of thing in SharePoint. So that's really kind of the direction you would put those cases.
Oh, and the UI, but they got to work on that. They're going to get there. The navigation, if you're in a large company or you have lots of teams, that scrolling experience for all the teams and all the, it's going to get better. But I personally hate that as well. It's drives me
The naming
crazy.
convention and all the tons of groups that are created and all that.
Yeah, it's all coming.
It's coming, but
It's even in preview, a lot of those things.
Yeah.
Naming conventions and stuff.
So
I was at a session. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So before the end of the year, most of the team's announcements that you've heard, so it's going to check to see if that team already exists, those sort of things, the extensibility, the amount of people you can have on a chat. There are limitations right now, because, we got to call Skype Teams now. So there's a lot of that. But chat-based information management, well, chat-based information has always been there. You now get to manage that information. So it's a huge departure from going HR, marketing. There's communications of some sort, and it's one-way announcement instead of Yammer. You now have core-focused, in-a-loop, chat-based information management that you'll eventually be able to mine and group by. So that's what Teams is for.
Great.
I think it'll be great.
Thank you very much.
One thing I would add to the teams thing. Be very honest. I'm an IT pro guy, and more so than that, I'm a security guy. So when I first saw Teams demoed, maybe a year ago, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, I thought, oh, that's cute. Okay, it's a new UI, it's a new front end, and I literally didn't think twice about it, right? Because I don't focus in that area usually. But one of the biggest revelations here at Ignite for me was the Teams architecture session, where I saw that they've actually rebuilt the entire pipeline from Teams, from the client into the service. Right? They've made it much more efficient, much more powerful. There's going to be a lot more coming. within that front-end UI. And it is going to get better, as these guys said. So for me at this conference, Teams suddenly became a much more impactful thing. So very
got
much.
real.
Yeah, for me personally, it got real.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's getting bigger, for sure. Thank you very much.
Oh.
What?
No.
No, that was a full hour.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, go.
Okay.
My team and our organization is 100% custom business solutions. We're 100% on-prem today. We're looking to move, but we've been curious as to how do you move from dev, test, QA, prod? I mean, how do you actually operate a standard ALM within the online solutions?
I wish we had a good answer to that.
That's kind of what we're
yeah,
hearing.
there's a concept today of dev tenants, but you never know exactly. There's no version in Office 365, essentially. So they're flighting different kind of features on different tenants, and you can never be sure what features you have in your tenant. The only thing you know it's called targeted release now. Some features are rolling out first, but let's assume you create a Q&A tenant and a production tenant. And when they flight one of the new features, even though they have targeted release on both, they target like 10% of the targeted release first. So you can't really do that. So you have to work out your own way. You can work with the Q&A tenant, and I do that with a lot of customers. But feature-wise, or version-wise, whatever, flighting-wise, it's really hard to determine. But yes, you should have a Q&A tenant to test certain features. And if you are a large enterprise, you shouldn't have targeted release on your production tenant, of course. Mm-hmm. Then the likelihood of the Q&A tenant being a little bit ahead of the production tenant.
Yeah, it's certainly the key missing piece from the developer space in terms of Office 365 generally, and also, broader as well to a certain degree. But I mean, it's definitely recognized, and there is some work being done to help address it. It's not a question of applying exactly the same ALM to cloud development, because it's not going to be the same, but the principles are of course still entirely valid. So there's a lot of pressure behind the scenes to try and ramp that up, but of course having the toolkits and having the core development capabilities and not making sure that there's not any sort of fundamental gaps in platform capability first has kind of always been the Microsoft way, even from sort of looking at it way back to the late 90s. So yeah, there's a lot of people, sort of knocking on them and saying, come on, let's get this moving. But yeah, it'll also require, of course, some changes to the service engineering. And, it's often overlooked just how much the behind the scenes service engineering is changing and learning as the adoption increases and as Microsoft continue to gain experience in what we've all suffered, working with customers and on premises for so many years. And so that's the next natural stage of evolution from a service perspective, at least, because yeah, with the flighting, you would be able to apply probably only 75% of a traditional ALM approach with confidence.
Have you guys seen any success with anyone else? Is there a tool set or anything even to do the basic stuff like recreating site columns and content types?
Yeah, and that kind of thing we do all the time, and we use the PMP PowerShell scripts are perfect for that, for instance, and that in combination with Visual Studio Online, so you can do essentially continuous integration and deployment using that. So, or you can do it with NPM or Node.js script or whatever you want to do. So that's how we do it.
Okay.
Yeah, so provisioning assets and those kind of things, definitely the PMP toolkit should be your baseline for that. It's not going to do everything. You're going to have to kind of tweak it a little bit and so on. We also have a couple of SharePoint vendors who are working on tooling to help in this space. Both Rencore and Syskit have got solutions in this space or coming very soon. So yeah, there's a lot of momentum to give us all fill up the toolbox with the management aspects of things.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Shifting gears just a little bit, obviously we as technologists are all struggling to keep pace with all these new tools that are coming available to us. Our users are struggling even more probably than we are. I'm curious what you guys have seen, not a which tool for what purpose, that's been discussed over and over here. But I'm curious if you guys have seen communication strategies or different ways of engaging with end user groups that have been particularly powerful in groups that you've worked with for helping users manage this transition and keep pace with new tools and effectively utilize them.
I can take an example from how we do with the Avanon. We are trying to mimic what the Windows team is doing with the Windows Insiders program. So we have essentially an Avanade Insiders program, which you opt into, and we have a Yammer group for all the Avanade Insiders where you can discuss new features, etc. But also the benefit within quotes of being in this group is you're unsupported. You will get some builds a little bit before everyone else. For instance, the Office client, you get the new features before everyone else. So, and we have that constant interaction with our IT department then, and they see what issues we see, and we are also the ambassadors of those new features and helping each other, specifically on Yammer. We use that a lot for those kind of communications. And it's been very successful so far.
Yeah, and I would just add to our, what's even, I think, sometimes harder for us as a customer of Microsoft at Avanade is we dog food really early, and we dog food everything. Our culture's like super bleeding edge and all this stuff, and it can cause a lot of disruption, but our culture, because we're a global SI, is that we want to be ahead of it, right? So not every company's culture wants to be super duper bleeding edge and living that pain, but the piloting and the opting in, I think, is really key. The way that Accenture rolled out, because they're right in the middle of all that too, and their culture's certainly not that, right? Is they have an opt-in for all their Windows 10 upgrades, right? And eventually, if you want a new machine, if you don't upgrade, you can't, right, get to the next thing you want. But they're using an opt-in program at a bigger scale for bigger transformations, and that works really well for them because then users feel like they're in control of that, and then being able to message the benefit of opting into them, almost like a campaign until you get enough groundswell, and then you can start kind of being a little more aggressive about voluntolding people to jump on board. But I think that's what I've seen work best at really large, complex environments. I think when you're a smaller company, it's a little easier to progress change, right? But
make it small, digestible pieces of information too. You don't want to send them a long email with like 15 new things that just came out in Office 365. Just maybe tip of the day, tip of the week, or did you know, and kind of highlight maybe something that's new or changed, and just make it just a small chunk that they can just easily, quickly understand without overwhelming them.
yeah, and I like the in-context help ISVs out there like Content Panda who give users that kind of in-context panel help right when they're in the task. I think those are helpful things too, because I may not want to go leave the experience to figure out kind of what I'm supposed to do with the thing that changed. The other thing I've seen the product team do lately.
On the new Office homepage, yeah.
Yeah, so when they change major things, sometimes they give you that little wizard that says, hey, let me show you what changed, and it's got a little...
So nice.
It's so much nicer than before when they would just change something and you're like, oh my gosh, what just happened, right? So I think there's a lot of ways to approach it, but I also want to give credit to them because they are doing better. They're listening, because a lot of us said
They are listening.
They are listening. So yeah.
My name's Jason, and a request I receive a lot is document libraries or lists with items that all have basically unique permissions, and usually kind of conditionally. Either this is the employee's document and I only want the supervisor to be able to see it, or this is this person owns this document and only the author can go in and see it and edit it. And I get that request all the time, and I know I can do it through a workflow in some cases, but I'm, especially for my 2010 environment, had workflows failing or just not running all the time, and constantly having to keep track of that. My biggest fear is to have a very sensitive document that's supposed to restrict access, but that doesn't happen. Is SharePoint just not the right place for that, or have you guys thought of any solutions for that kind of thing?
For that type of thing, I would encourage you to kind of not think so much about where the document is, but think of where it is, but think what it is. Because the real solution here for that type of scenario is information rights management. Because that travels with the document. So it doesn't matter where it is, doesn't matter where its official storage place is, because even if it's in a list library, that document can end up in email, it can end up in all manner of different places. So for things like that, where effectively you have a requirement for claims-based access control, on the document, information rights management is the appropriate way to deal with that scenario. And then that will stay with that document, whether it's in SharePoint Library on-premise, or whether it ends up in SharePoint Online, or whether it ends up in somewhere else, going forward.
So I would agree with Spencer. I think there are some great controls in there, like IRM, Information Rights Management. Claims-based authorization, if you're ever able to implement it, is fantastic as well. The other thing I would offer you is, we've set this up with a number of clients, large financial organizations that are subject to SEC, for example. And the SEC will come down on them and tell them, literally, you're not managing permissions to this information well, because this information could be used for insider trading, it's material non-public information, MNPI, this type of thing. So one of the things we put in place with them, or that we recommend to them, is, this is more on the policies and procedures side, so outside of SharePoint. Because personally, I'm a fan of unique permissions. I think they're fine, as long as you manage them well. That's the key. So the things we recommend are, first of all, identify where your sensitive information is. Like, really identify it, right? Know which sites, even down to the sub-site level, if you're using sub-sites, contain sensitive information, what type of sensitive information you have. Designate data owners for those areas, right? Make sure the data owners agree to their responsibilities, and you've spelled out what their responsibilities are. Responsibilities are usually things like approve access requests, understand the compliance regulations around that information. And that particular one tends to elevate the data owner role a little bit higher, director, VP level, that kind of thing. So they often delegate some of their responsibilities. And then the third one, and this is kind of a key process that I would recommend, is perform regular permission and access reviews. So literally in your organization, and I don't know how big your organization is, but implement some sort of a process where on a regular cadence, whether it's every 3 months, every 6 months, every year, have those data owners review the permissions that are assigned to their content and certify that they're correct, or say, okay, I certify these that they're correct, but I need these changes. Now that needs to be a combination of IT and helping those data owners to do this. But by certifying, you actually want to collect evidence that they've certified. You want an email, you want some sort of documentation that they've done this. And that sort of process, doing all that, makes sure that you know where sensitive information is, what type of sensitive information you have, and you have these data owners staying on top of their permissions. Because that's one of the key issues with using unique permissions all over the place. People forget about them, and they accumulate, and people don't tend to manage them. So having this kind of strict process in place, and we implement some automation around it as well, I think that's a good way of managing your permissions. Because if you hire us to come in and audit you, that's one of the things we're going to look at. Do you know where your sensitive information is? Do you have data owners, people that are responsible for that information? And are you managing the permissions well? Or are you reviewing them on a regular basis?
And I just think one thing I just add is education, so that the people that own it know what it means to own it. I know I use this as an example a lot, but I think we're a good client, like example, just like you guys, right? And we have to protect a lot of client data at Avanade, and we all have to take the training every year and certify that we understand our data protection categories and how we categorize data. And if you don't take the training, you're not promotable. I mean, it's like, we take it that serious. If you're not compliant with your training, I don't care what kind of year you had, you're not getting a promotion. So no raise. If people take it serious when it starts to tie to like HR and things like that, where it's like, if it's in your industry where it's really important that that stuff is taken care of properly, and I think we're seeing more and more of that with all the breaches and stuff that are going around. I think a lot of it boils down to people aren't intently doing the wrong thing. They're just not educated on how to best protect the company's data. So we get leaks and people end up in the news, and I don't think those employees intend that to happen, but it does happen because they don't know how to do it right.
In your particular business solution, if you can, when you can, try and maybe segregate it out to different libraries at least and have permissions at the library level, but because then you can use the highlighted content web part, or of course the good old-fashioned content search web part, to roll things up to make it look like they're all in the same place if they have all the same content type, that type of thing. That's not always possible depending on your requirements, but that's one thing to try to at least segregate out maybe the top, at least a category that way.
Yeah, just one real quick follow-up question to the permission review. Luckily, we have ShareGate, which can provide a really good report for that stuff. Yep. Every year I have to provide a case and justify keeping the license for that. For those who don't have ShareGate, or when it's
taken away. Do you have a different solution for reporting permissions? Like a
there's
library
other-
with like 5,000 items?
There's other tools out there that do that as well, that'll provide reports. Worst case, if you don't have budget for a tool, I would say create something in PowerShell that will output reports on permissions in various places.
Lightning tools, DeliverPoint.
Yeah, custom audit permissions auditing tool, solutions are pretty common in the on-premises space. Certainly, probably 50% of corporate customers will have some form. But to Antonio's point, please use PowerShell. Please do not do anything in full trust code on the server. It's going to be quicker, yes, but it's also handcuffing you away from being able to, have flexibility, and also means you're locked into that platform. Upgrades, yeah, it's a nightmare. So, but yeah, if it's it's kind of a classic consultancy, right? Buy or build. It's going to cost you either way, but yeah, I would try and buy as much as possible in this space, because this is important stuff. It's easy to make mistakes in custom solutions, but yeah, it's a hugely common customization requirement, and in fact, this particular area is one of the key areas that's blocking a lot of people moving to the cloud, is because they've done that solution in the using full trust. And that's the last one left, the last man standing, if you will. So yeah, it's if you can't report on permissions, you shouldn't be doing permissions.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Were you going to say something else? One more quick thing. If you put people in SharePoint groups as much as possible and do permissions by SharePoint groups, you can go to that group just in your site admin and click view group permissions, and that will show you everywhere in a site collection that the group has permissions and what they have. It's one of those sort of little known things. You just can't do it per user that way. So.
Well, I did not know that, so thank you.
But if you've got 200,000 subsites, it becomes a headache. So that guy over there.
I have a comment and a question. So the comment is, our company is nationwide, so we do see there would be a lot of data repetition redundancy in our data, because we have Teams, we have Yammer, we have SharePoint. So in the end, we'll have a lot of data that would be replicated. And the problem with the new search is that it's graph driven. So as you go up the organization hierarchy, we'll see a lot of, similar search. So what I really hope, and the comment is, that the AI is smart enough to start identifying what duplicates there are and just show results based on maybe perhaps content types. However, my question is, SharePoint is on the receiving end of a lot of information, like, for instance, user profiles. Right now, the way SharePoint is pulling that information is from either Azure Active Directory or Exchange. Hopefully, user profile photos will go to Exchange only and not be housed on SharePoint itself. My question is, when these sync processes happen, do you think in any time in the future, Microsoft is going to probably give us some kind of a control to check if that sync process did happen successfully or not, or we'll still be checking for that information every single time for every single user?
Yes, is the answer to that. I do think that will be delivered. Regardless of where the, whatever potential future replacement for the user profile store is, there will be, full-on administration reporting on the sync process. I'd be fairly, can't comment on any kind of time frame, of course, but it's inherently in their interest to deliver that, because it's going to reduce the burden on them significantly, and of course address the other problem in terms of being able to have confidence in when some of these search things will light up based on the additional kind of vertical input into that query.
Okay.
Thank you.
In the recent past, when you're working with the customers with the advances on Power Apps and with Flow, are you recommending Office 365 customers keep InfoPath off and SharePoint Designer Workflows off? Or is it a depends answer?
Been doing that for years.
I would keep InfoPath off,
Yeah.
but SharePoint Designer Workflows still have a place. I mean, yeah, I think so.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
All right.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, InfoPath, if you're in the cloud now, you shouldn't bother about the InfoPath. Don't do that.
We don't have legacy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you have
Don't
legacy,
start with
then it's a different story. But then you should at least think of a migration story or start that journey. Workflows, SharePoint designing workflows are a little bit different than Flow. You can do a little bit more right now with SharePoint designing workflows. But I think, the future going forward, if I start something new, I would at least start looking, can I do it with Flow now?
Yeah, and the other key thing would specifically to InfoPath, but also a little bit with respect to things built on BCS is, in those sort of legacy situations, usually the tool drove the implementation approach. Right? We're no longer in that world, so we have it's an opportunity, if you will, to solve the same problem, but based on picking and choosing the right tool for the job rather than the only tool for the job, which was what very much InfoPath became. And so, just say no to InfoPath, basically.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
And just to add, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just lining up the next
Just
slide.
add one quick thing. Agree with what Victor said in terms of start with Flow first. And personally, if there's something I can't do in Flow, I would probably look to implement an Azure function, call the Azure function from Flow, and build that Azure function with whatever I'm comfortable
Excellent. Thank you very
It's
much.
not that end user friendly though.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Not end user. Good point.
Here's
Good
Azure,
point.
go get it, Tiger, right?
Yeah. Great point.
We currently have 2010 on premises, and the user profile is quite heavily customized. We're considering moving to SharePoint Online, and obviously there's a Delve profile, and we can't customize that today. And I'm not seeing a huge effort from Microsoft's side to really go ahead and let us customize that. There's some input on user voice, but some of it is in the plans, so there's not a whole lot being worked on. I'm wondering, what are your experiences with your clients? Do you have a lot of clients requiring customization of the profile, and how have you helped them with that? What are your recommendations?
Yeah, it's certainly a hugely common aspect of the classic intranet type deployment. Again, it's probably at least half of SharePoint on-premises customers have historically customized the profile. Browser experience, and people search, white pages, those kind of things. And it's kind of like a lot of these discussions we're having, it's like, yes, there really isn't a way to sort of lift and shift that experience to the cloud, because it doesn't really make sense once you can convince the user population or the business that the kind of the new way is better and offers much more business value. I mean, like a white pages application, for example, has no real value in the world of Office 365 because you've got the inherent power of the default capability, if you will. But nevertheless, there's still many other things that people would like to do in terms of customizing the user interface and so on and so forth. With respect to that, I think over time that will open up. I'm pretty confident about that because it's such a popular scenario. But also at the same time, we want them to try and guide us away from perhaps some of those things, because if we lock ourselves into those and we have that ability, then that stops Microsoft innovating with the things that can actually scale to the type of infrastructure, performance and intelligence that we need as we have this plethora of tools. One of the reasons why it works so well in SharePoint on premises is because we had a quite narrow, scope within the SharePoint platform for the types of things we could do. Whereas, nowadays with Office 365, it's basically unlimited in terms of all of the capability. So, they need to be cautious, because by allowing us to get in there and really, heavily customize it, that's going to prevent that innovation from their side. So it is a balancing act, but I am confident we'll be able to do more in terms of customization going forward. It's a question of when they feel comfortable in opening that up. And right now, it would be a very risky proposition.
And also, would it be used as SharePoint user profiles or Azure AD?
Exactly, yeah. Not to kind of get too crystal ball about it, but the inevitable end state of all of this is that instead of having a directory in SharePoint and a directory in Exchange and a directory in whatever, right, there's going to be one directory, and that's the point at which it makes sense to do the kind of the white pages type applications.
Yeah, and
I build a Power App for that.
I was just going to say, I would look, since it is a 2010 intranet, I would look at what drove the customizations in the first place, like why are they there, and then are there things that could be serviced better with other capabilities in the cloud that might kind of reduce that business driver for the customizations. And I saw a lot of those customizations. I mean, gosh, I had teams that built a lot of those for clients, but it was because the profile was kind of, it was dumb, right? It was dumber on premise. It's much more intelligent in Office 365. So kind of maybe dissect why the customizations were there in the first place way back when they started happening, and you might find that they're not needed anymore, or that there's something better waiting for you out of the box in the cloud. So.
Yeah, and don't forget as well that we have the APIs to retrieve that profile data. So there's no reason that you couldn't build a Azure app or you could pick any number of sort of customization approaches. I was nearly going to say development, but
right. But the profile link on the top right, you can't customize that. You can't move it. So people will get to that profile anyway.
Yeah,
you don't want to have double profiles.
You would need to add in another point of confusion for the user in order to get to that. Yeah, for sure.
There is a connector, though, for Power Apps and Flow called Office 365 users, and you could use that in a Power App and make a really pretty, very custom Power App that has user information.
Right, but still back to the fact that you can't.
But they would have to get on their phone.
It's not going to move on the right hand side.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, I've seen those scenarios too with enterprise customers where they needed that employee phone book. They had an app on their internet that had that with all this personalized information. So I think that's where Power Apps can really help solve those problems, because some of those were the highest used homepage web parts in a lot of older intranets.
A lot of this is a different way of working.
People profile searchy kind of experience.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks.
Hi. A couple of years ago, I remember Victor and Spencer did a demonstration of how to install Workflow Manager on a SharePoint 2013.
No.
Have you tried to do the same on 2016 SharePoint, Windows Server 16, SQL Server 16? And in addition to that, what is Microsoft doing, not telling us that Workflow is not working on premises anymore?
Yeah, I mean, the Workflow Manager product is effectively deprecated except for use in conjunction with SharePoint Server on premises. There has been no decision yet made in terms of, how long that will continue to be the case, in terms of what's happening with vNext for on premises, but we have a support life cycle of 10 years. So right now, that means, you will be supported with the appropriate versions of SQL and Windows Server -1, so version -1, unless they decide to change the support cycle, then that will be consistent. So, the thing to watch out for is, let's say we want to use SQL 2017, we have to wait for there to be a cumulative update for Workflow Manager and Service Bus to enable that. And so, it's going to be version -1 for most of us as we go forward. Yeah, but Workflow Manager, again, it's a bit like BCS, it's still there, you can still use it, it's not being killed, but you want to try and move away from it, because, the reason that Workflow Manager, as a separate product, was replaced was because it wasn't fit for purpose in the cloud. And so it gives you a fairly good indication that, there won't be a long-term on-premises replacement for that. Doesn't mean you won't be able to achieve what you want, what you needed Workflow Manager for, but again, it's like all the other conversations. It will be by sort of choosing out of a menu of different approaches that could work, including in this particular space, obviously third-party solutions.
Yeah, for Microsoft, there's no real replacement for Workflow Manager.
Yeah, correct. So yeah, But from a supportability and perspective in terms of, you can have confidence in it for the foreseeable future.
But only on the old platform. Yeah.
Okay, one last question.
Time for one more.
Yes, hello. So we saw a lot of great stuff about groups this week. A lot of stuff had to do with like the default library of the group. And just wondering people's opinions about if we start provisioning sites that have multiple libraries, and with the limits going away on libraries, if like the writing on the wall is maybe I should stick everything in one library and not have other libraries.
My personal opinion is that that default library, when you put a team on the group, then that's where all the folders get created and all the files get created. And then if somebody goes from the SharePoint side and starts messing with the folder names or creating more, then it like breaks a bunch of stuff. So I think that when you're in the SharePoint site and you want to have different libraries, you create different libraries for those people that are using the SharePoint site for SharePoint. But I would leave that default one alone because of the possibility of teams using it and doing its own team stuff to it. What do y'all think of that?
No, I agree.
I do think additional libraries have a place, though, in your team sites, right? Libraries are a logical grouping, whether it's a business grouping or a technical whatever, a logical grouping of your documents. So I think they still have a place, but I do agree with Laura. I wouldn't mess with the default one.
Yeah, if you create a folder from within SharePoint, it doesn't show up in the teams.
Yeah. And then even if you use add additional libraries, you can add them to Teams as well. It's just another tab or in the Files tab. So, and as you said previously, if you want to use permissions, etc., libraries, it's better to do it than on folders or on item level. Okay, I think that was it. Oh, we have one more question.
Oh, they gave us a couple more seconds, so last one.
It's going the other way around.
I also have a question about folders. Short background, we have a lot of team sites. We allow end users full control. They can request new team sites. They get them after a few minutes. And the person requesting them will get full control. And so I want to know how we could make them behave a little better with folders. Because in my mind, there's nothing like folders if you want to mess up permissions on a team site. Imagine folders with one character names. You can have 100 levels of them. Imagine what happens if your end users break permissions, break inheritance on all those levels. Imagine the chaos. You cannot you cannot put a limit to the number of levels like you can with subsites, which is the other SharePoint object that you can nest. We put a limit on the number of levels of subsites, so when they reach the second level below the top site, there's simply no templates available. Do you have any ideas how you can improve the situation regarding folders? Sometimes I wish there was a way to strip away the folders when they upload, because they usually grab a chunk from a file share where they have a lot of nested folders, and they end up in the library. So sometimes I would wish there was a way to strip away the folders at that time, or sometimes I wish there was like a setting in the document library that would only allow a certain number of levels. But there isn't, so do you have any ideas?
I think it's all about training. So call Laura, she has really good training on that.
I think that one's either going to be governance or just turning off the ability to create folders at all. I don't know of any in between or PowerShell way to control the
turn off the folder content type.
Yeah, but the problem with that is there's actual features of the product that rely on folders, not things that we care about as an end user or like as an implementer, but if they weren't there, it wouldn't work. So yeah, that's not feasible. Unfortunately, this is a bit like versioning, right? Before we had minor versions, everybody wanted them. Then we had them, everybody complained about them. And so it's you can't win either way. But yeah, really it's all about, unfortunately, with the case of folders specifically,
you could create a flow that moves it out of a folder. You have to do that on every single library, though.
Yeah, I think there's no shortcut for remediation and education, unfortunately, in the governance side. And I already knew you were talking about file share movement before, because you were saying all the levels of nesting and stuff. That's commonly seen when file shares just go from old place to new place. without the remediation steps in between. So
I have at least.
that works, and not the easiest work or the funnest work to do, but to get a clean reset, you're going to have to probably do some of that.
Yeah, we have. Well, yeah, but also again, you know, monitoring and analysis. I mean, I have at least 3 customers who've got, you know, scheduled tasks that are basically iterating through and discovering the places where they've got the nightmare, you know, of the deep nested, and then, you know, it's have a conversation with the site owner. It's usually the same site owner, you know, over and over again. And, you know, so yeah, there is, you know, there's tooling, or, you know, automation tooling that can help, but at the end of the day, yeah, it's a people problem, really. Just think, you know, because the reason it's a problem on a file share is the same, that's the root cause is the same as why it's a problem on SharePoint or on Documentum or whatever, right? So, yeah, having the report to tell you where it is really the only kind of software solution.
We got to wrap.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Please fill in the invite, the eval.